Hey, do you like Yakuza? Of course you do. Who doesn't?
Hey, how's it going?
Can you simply not wait 2 whole more weeks for Infinite Wealth to release?
I can't do it.
Are you just not excited for Infinite Wealth in general because you don't like the turn-based combat? Would you rather just have normal brawler-style combat in your Yakuza games? Did Gaiden simply not scratch that itch for you because it was only like 5 minutes long? And if the answer to any of those questions at all was yes, then I've got a game for you.
Behold! Whoopsie. Now behold!
Right to Fight is the best Yakuza fan game I've played on Roblox, which, granted, it's the only Yakuza fan game I've played on Roblox, but it still sets a pretty high bar. I think one of this game's biggest successes is the actual city it's set in, which is called The Steel. I think the map just has a pretty good layout, honestly, and especially when you turn your graphics settings up and head over to the west side. It's got just a really cool seaside, east coast kind of vibe, you know? If I had to pick one map from the main series to compare it to, it would definitely be Onomichi from Yakuza 6. And that's fine because Onomichi is one of my favorite one-off locations from the series. The Steel isn't as cozy as Onomichi is, which is fine because Onomichi is going for a very, cozy kind of suburban seaside town vibe, and the Steel is much more of a typical urban setting. But they still both give off really similar vibes, just kind of like opposite sides of the spectrum. Because obviously these aren't very tropical seaside locations like Okinawa was in 3 or Hawaii is in Infinite Wealth. There are also just other differences in map feel because Right to Fight is set in America, whereas the Yakuza games are set in Japan, so there's just differences in how the cities are laid out. There's also just a bunch of little small details, like there are working stoplights in this game, which really impressed me, especially because there's no cars here. That little detail I think a lot of people would overlook. I appreciate stuff like that in games like this. You can also see here just how pretty this game can look sometimes. There's also a convenience store on the map, which, that's like a key aspect of the actual main games they needed to nail, is going into a convenience store and stuffing your pockets with food. And it's like the newer games where you can buy 10 of every single item, so go crazy. There's also a restaurant on the map, O'Day's Steakhouse, which sadly is not like the actual restaurants in the main games where you actually go in and dine there. It's basically just a more expensive convenience store where you buy the different expensive food items to keep in your inventory. Still appreciate the variety though. The pause menu in this game reminds me a lot of Akiyama's pause menu from Yakuza 4, but sadly this game doesn't have a working map in the pause menu yet. You're just going to have to use the little mini-map you get at the bottom of your screen. There's a karaoke bar on the map, which you can't go inside of it right now, but it's got a ton of little details like this in the stores as you can see that it helps to make the map feel very well thought out, even if a lot of the stuff isn't interactable. That's one of the biggest cons with this game, is that there just aren't any mini-games in it. And that's one of the big things that makes the Like a Dragon series just so special, is just all the mini-games you get with every single game in the series. And come to think of it, there aren't any quests in this game at all. There's no main story to follow, and there's also no sub-stories to follow. Literally, all you can do in this game is run around the city, go, explore, you can pick fights on the street, or you can go fight the dungeons, which those are really this game's biggest draw, are the dungeon battles. There's quite a lot of the dungeons, and I'll talk about a couple of my favorite ones, but before we actually get to those, I want to talk about the combat itself real quick. The combat in Right to Fight is extremely derivative of the combat in Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami. Like, if you played those games, you've pretty much just played Right to Fight before. And that's not a bad thing, because Yakuza 0 and Kiwami have some of the best combat in the whole series, and this does a really good job at replicating that feel in Roblox. You have 3 styles at your disposal, the first of which is Fisticuffs, which is basically just Brawler from Yakuza 0 and Kiwami. This is straight up just the best style in the game. You never need to switch to the other 2 styles if you don't want to. The other styles can be pretty fun to use, but Fisticuffs is going to get you through all of your different fights much easier than the other 2 styles will. The second best style is Brute, which is just Beast style, and this will get you through street fights super easily, but when you're actually in the dungeons and you're fighting harder enemies, this is when it starts to kind of fall off. But for groups of mob enemies, this will still get you through pretty easily, especially if you use the heat actions that can take out like 2 or 3 guys at once. I still wouldn't say that it's as good as Fisticuffs though, just because it has a much more limited moveset and it really kind of drops the ball against bosses, because bosses will usually just block a lot of your heavier attacks. This is still a pretty viable style, and I still think it's a lot of fun. The third style is Frenzy, and this is supposed to be Rush style, and much like Rush style, I'm really not a big fan of it. You never feel like you're doing very much damage to the enemies, and it's got a super limited supply of heat actions. But that's the problem with this whole game, but Frenzy suffers from it the worst. And yeah, it's the fastest style, but the attacks are so weak, you'd just be better off using Fisticuffs, because that's still a fast-ish style, and you can upgrade its combo speed to get it faster. And you'll be eliminating the enemies so much quicker than with Frenzy style. I don't like this one at all. It's, I think, pretty objectively the worst one. This game also has equipable weapons, which are pretty cool, and you can just buy them from the equipment store or get them from enemies and dungeons as rewards. And obviously there's just weapons on the floor as well, and furniture you can use as weapons. Obviously I could go more in depth with the combat, but I'd basically just be describing Yakuza 0 and Kiwami combat, which I feel like most people who are watching this video would have played. And if you haven't played them yet, you can just go try Right to Fight, because that's the best thing about it, is it's free, so anyone can basically go in on their phone and try it out to see what I'm talking about. But yeah, the combat in this game is good, but I can't really give all the credit to the game, because obviously it is just Yakuza 0 combat. But they do a very, very good job at getting it to work well in Roblox, so hats off to them. Now let's get to the really fun part of this game, the dungeons. Some of the dungeons in Right to Fight are just recreations of long battles from the Yakuza series, and then some of them are completely original. I think my favorite of the completely original ones is the Jeff Dojo. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's a martial arts dojo you're fighting through, but everyone in there's name is some variation of Jeff. Kind of like the Gary Vault from Fallout. You know, it's very weird, but it does feel very like a dragon, you know? Like, this really does feel like something from a sub-story in a Yakuza game. But yeah, so you basically fight your way through this huge room filled with guys all named Jeff, and then you make your way to, like, the back room area of the dojo, like the back sparring area, I'm guessing. And that's where you fight the two bosses of this dungeon, Sensei Jeff Jefferson and his apprentice, Senpai Jefferson. It's a really fun kind of David and Goliath type boss fight where Jefferson, the apprentice, is he's a big enemy and he's a lot slower, but he has a lot less health and he usually goes down easily. But then once you defeat him, Sensei Jeff Jefferson is basically like the Kamaki of Right to Fight. He's a very nimble and agile opponent, especially given his age, and he's just a really fun boss to fight against. He's a pretty challenging boss though, because he is, like I said, like basically the Kamaki of this game. He has a lot of really quick combos that can stun lock you if you're not careful. And this goes for all the bosses, but if he knocks you on the ground when he's in heat mode, he can do a heat action on you. It'll knock you down to 1 health, so you gotta look out for that too. Despite all this though, if you can overcome the odds and beat Sensei Jeff Jefferson, you'll have completed the Jeff Dojo dungeon. Like I said, this is one of my favorites in the game. Another fun one is the Mob Skyscraper, which for most of the way through, it's a really generic arena where you're basically just fighting through rooms of enemies, and they give you a lot of guns, so it's not very difficult. But it really does get going once you get to the final area, which is the roof. Clearly this is Right to Fight's version of a Millennium Tower fight, or just a skyscraper fight in general, which obviously is just a staple of the Yakuza series. The boss of this dungeon is Derek, who is a pretty typical Yakuza boss. He's like a really tough, strong guy. He'll throw you around like a ragdoll. But the game gives you a little room on the top of the skyscraper that just has a bunch of weapons, like guns and swords and stuff in there that will help you fight the boss and all of his goons he has. These tools the game gives you won't last the whole fight though, they'll all break before he's done, so you really do need to just be good at the combat and tough it out, but if you play smart and use all the tools at your disposal, you'll persevere and conquer the Mob Skyscraper no problem, and you'll show Derek who really has the right to fight. The Mob offices are a recreation of the Dojima offices from Yakuza 0. They do a really good job at recreating each of the different encounters that you have in that, like, long battle from Yakuza 0, because it's like the one from the beginning of the game. This fight even has Fiend, who is this game's version of Yoneda, who is this guy from Zero who would try and jump you every chance he got during the Dojima offices fight. And you know, you go the whole 9 yards with this fight. You go up the fire escape and into the bathroom where you get jumped by Fiend with a knife, just like in Zero. This dungeon only really starts to differentiate itself once you get to the end, where you eventually end up outside and you're fighting Fiend, who again has a knife, and then also another boss who has a bazooka, which obviously never happened in Yakuza 0. And then after you beat Fiend and then the guy with the rocket launcher, you make your way into this fancy looking door here, and then you fight the Silent Stranger, who replaces Kuze as the boss of this arena. And this guy's a lot tougher than Kuze was, and Kuze was a really tough boss for I think everyone when they first play Zero. He's like usually a pretty big speed bump that really makes you get good, so to speak. But I couldn't beat the Silent Stranger, so like this fight is tough. He's super fast, he's really good at breaking through your guards, he stun locks you, he's just a really, really intense boss fight. The Mob Hotel, on the other hand, is a recreation of the hotel raid from Yakuza 6, which I really wasn't expecting that of all long battles to be in this game, because I feel like that's one that kind of gets overlooked. But just like with the Mob Office, they do a really good job at recreating every single part of the long battle here. Like, you fight through the main lobby, you fight through a whole floor's worth of rooms if you want to, you fight through like the sauna spa area of the hotel. Instead of a Somea fight though, you're fighting the Silent Stranger again from last time, and he's basically the same fight again, but this time I showed him who was boss. And it totally has nothing to do with the fact that I had just unlocked the Tiger Drop by the time I fought this guy in this dungeon. I actually just got really good at the game. And all these dungeons are fun and all, but there's one more thing I want to talk about that this game has that I feel like the main Yakuza series has been lacking for basically ever now. So let's get right into it. Well, yeah, so this game is a PvP arena you can fight in. You can find it right next to this poster of a sad-looking Kiryu right in the spawn area. This game has a whole on-ranking system and everything, too. It's got a lot to it. And I'm assuming that there's not very many players because it took me like 5 minutes to even find a game, which maybe I was just playing at a bad time, but keep that in mind if you want to try it out for yourself. You might have to wait a little while. But finally, I found my first opponent, Sunset Shiny Sunny. And let me tell you, our fight was magnificent. But yeah, so this game literally places you in one-on-one battles with other players, and you just use the combat system to fight each other. You know, you can use the different styles, you can use combos, you can use heat actions, whatever you want, you can use. And I feel like something like this would be really good in the Yakuza series, not even necessarily for like a competitive sense, but just like letting you just have fun with your friends and just beat each other up, because these games have very fun combat, and I think that could be a lot of fun just to play with friends. And I'm not necessarily saying I want them to add a whole on like multiplayer experience like with deathmatch and capture the flag and all like every single game had back in like the Xbox 360 era. I'm just saying that even something maybe like how Dark Souls or Watch Dogs has like an invasion system where someone can invade your game as a street fight enemy and then like you have to fight them. Something like that I feel like could be really cool in Yakuza. But even if it was just something like a Coliseum like this where you could just fight people, you know, one-on-one, maybe 2v2s, I feel like that could go a long way. But obviously I don't work at RGG Studios, I'm not a game developer, so don't take it from me, because obviously ideas and actually putting them into practice with video games are two completely different things. Even if they made it its own thing, where it's just all about the Coliseum, kind of like the Corregio, I don't really know how it's pronounced. I had someone correct my pronunciation of it, and I don't know the right way to pronounce it, so that could be fun. But I'm rambling now, but basically the Coliseum in this game, for fighting other people, very fun. Again, this is something I wish the main series would have. This is one of the best things that this game has going for it. And I can't wrap up this video without talking about the secret Kiryu boss, which is probably what Right to Fight is most known for. I know it's blown up on Twitter a couple times, it's probably been on YouTube a bunch. But you can fight the Dragon of Dojima if you go down the alley that you spawn and all the way to the end. He's there, and you know, he's just Kiryu, you know, he can't be that bad of a boss fight, right? So let's give it a shot. I almost got him. So overall, I think Right to Fight is a super fun game that's worth checking out if you want. Just something Yakuza-esque to kind of pass the time until Infinite Wealth drops. Obviously, it isn't up to the same standard of quality as the main series, and it's lacking in content in some areas. And that probably isn't going to change anytime soon because the development for this game is in place on indefinite hold. But it's still definitely worth checking out for what it is. Hopefully we'll see it get updated in the future and get a lot more content, but I wouldn't keep my fingers crossed. And if anyone from RGG Studios or Sega happens to be watching this video, I've got a bit of an idea I want to try and sell you on, so hear me out. Okay, so it's called Wish for Fish. And this whole game is just one big fishing minigame. It's genius. Sure, there'll be different types of fishing minigames in here, but they'll all still be just fishing minigames. It'll sell like millions. Look at this data I hooked up. You can't deny that this is going to sell like hotcakes. Because of this one thing that everyone loves in video games, it's fishing minigames that drag on way too long. Seriously though, like Sega, Nintendo, Activision, any publisher wants a slice of this pie, reach out to me because you are going to want to get in on this on the ground floor. Anyways, all joking aside, this has been Tactic Zombies, peace out and God bless. Catch you guys later.